just looked at my watch and saw that it was 12:30, screamed, ran to my office and started the broadcast. So apologies if I look a little bit hurried, because that is exactly what I am. But I am so grateful to you for being here. You may see, hi Penny. Penny said hi in the chat. If this is your first time joining one of my webinars, then you've probably already picked up on the vibe. The idea is this will take 30 minutes. It will probably be extremely fast and frantic. I used to do these big grand intros. I'd start off camera and do the whole kind of welcome to the screen, Toby Martin. And then I realized just the amount of information that we get through in half an hour. And so thought that we'd better just get on with it, really. Hello, Jenny. Hi, Lisa. Thank you for being here. As you've seen, there's a chat function. Please do have a look around your screen. You'll find a chat function. Please do avail yourself of it. The more interaction we have, the better. I love it when there's a bit of chat, and I'll do my best to keep an eye on it while still waffling on and respond to it best I can. Quick point just at the outset: the last time I ran a webinar from this room, which is my little broom cupboard at home, I had some Wi-Fi connectivity issues. It was a lot of fun. Since then, I've sacked Virgin Media, got someone else, and they tell me it should be fine. But if there is any problem, please let me know in the chat, and I'll run a little bit closer to the router. So as you can tell, we're going to have a lot of fun this afternoon. We've got a new lunchtime kickoff. I used to do these at 3 o'clock, which clashed horribly with the school run. So I hope that you are settled in with a wrap, noodles, whatever it may be. You'll also see, as well as having a chat function, there's also a couple of other features I want to point out to you. One is polls, which I can see a few of you have already voted in. I have a poll up there at the moment which says, what kind of event are you more interested in, webinars or in-person events? And the votes are coming in slightly weighted towards webinars. We'll be covering both today. And finally, there's also a tab for handouts. There's nothing in there yet. I normally drop them in towards the end once we've covered most of the material, so they make a little bit more sense. But there will be some handouts covering a lot of what we're going to be talking about. So enough introductory waffle. Let's crack on. If it is your first time, welcome. My name's Toby. I don't do an awful lot in the way of introductions or explaining who I am and what I do. I'm Toby. I've got a website. If you want to know more about me, please visit it. The focal point of this session is Landlord events. And actually, let's skip to the next slide. The reason why I want to talk about Landlord events is I think that they are underused and incredibly effective. I ran them myself in my old agency that I ran. I was an agent for 13 years. And ran a business in Bath in the West Country, or Bath if you're from the North Country, and really effective way of promoting yourself locally, really effective way of putting yourself in front of new landlords. I'm going to refer to landlords a lot throughout this. It could equally be sellers. Landlords was predominantly my experience when it came to webinars and in-person events, but it correlates across just fine. So if you're a sales agent, this does still apply to you, and I think it's still a great opportunity. Why do they work? Because it's a great way of positioning yourself as the local expert. You are literally putting yourself in front of an audience, demonstrating your knowledge and your expertise. It's a question of guidance and educating your audience as opposed to sales pitches. That's what makes these events most effective, when you're actually approaching it with the mentality, I am going to go out here and educate my audience in something that will genuinely benefit them. And I do encourage people to go easy on the sales pitches, because that's when your audience starts to distrust you. So this gives you a great opportunity to A, demonstrate expertise, and B, build trust. It's a nurture process rather than a quick fire sales process. Typically, it does take time to turn attendees into leads and nurture them into clients. So I'm afraid this isn't a grand overnight success strategy, but it is something that if you stick with, it will really build your reputation locally, and over time, it will grow your client base. So I don't talk about myself an awful lot in these sessions, but I'm going to make a bit of an exception here, because this is I'd like to start by telling you my own experience, and actually let's just shrink that slightly. So as I mentioned, I ran my own agency for many years, and this is something that was very successful for me. So I want to begin by just telling you my own experience, and then we'll go on to unpack it and explain how you can do this yourself. And actually, it was in-person events that I really got going with my agency, and we'll go through the pros and cons of both. But the great advantage of in-person events is that obviously it puts you in a room with prospective clients, and you know, the ability to build connections and to actually make an impact on those people is that much greater when you're in a room with them. We hired a room in a hotel with a capacity of 50, and we were quite. I used to run these once a quarter, so I call them the Bath Landlord Conference. I'd call it. I didn't associate it with my own business because I didn't want people to think that it was a sales pitch. So we called it the Bath Landlord Conference. No business name in there at all. And from the very first session, I reckon we had 30 at the first session, but from the second event onwards, we would sell out the venue, and we would get consistently sellouts. And I'd say about 3/4 of those would not be my clients. They would be landlords completely unknown to me, as opposed to packing the room out with people who are already my existing clients. Over time, I became well known to those people. I would host the events myself. We would have guest speakers, but I would very much be, surprise, surprise, the central figure in terms of hosting, greeting, and building those connections. And eventually, those people would start to turn into clients as and when the need arose for them to require professional support. So my experience shows that this works. And it is an underutilized opportunity. And I think that the reasons behind that are because there's some nervousness around it when you're putting yourself in a slightly vulnerable position, literally on a stage in front of a room of strangers. What if no one shows up? What if they ask questions? What if they're mean to you? So there's nervousness about it because, what if it goes wrong? And we'll address that later. So that fear of failure. But I promise you, it's easier than you think. It's less intimidating than you think. And if you approach it with the right mindset, which I'll explain a bit later, there is literally zero risk of failure. So my own experience shows that this is an opportunity which possibly no one else in your area is doing, because not many agents really stick their head above the parapet in this way. And if that is the case, then this could be an opportunity for you to really claim that territory locally. So let's move on to the nuts and bolts of this. Now, first and foremost, there's no one way of doing this. I'm going to tell you my way of doing it, but of course, there's multiple different ways. There's different formats. There's different platforms. So, for example, you could do webinars or you could do in-person events. Let's have a look at that poll again. We're almost split down the middle, actually. 57-42. It's almost like Brexit all over again. 57% of the people here are interested in webinars, 42 in-person events. So webinars are really appealing, and obviously, clearly, it's what I do at the moment, and that explains one of the benefits to you, in that my audience for my business right now are not all local, so there would be no reason for me to hire a local conference room when the agents who I work with are dispersed across the country. And similarly, especially for lettings agents, your clients might not all be local. They might be overseas, they might be investors based elsewhere. So a webinar gives you access to a wider client base potentially, if you can reach them. Webinars are put lower cost to organize, but there is still a cost involved. Webinar platforms aren't all that cheap. Typically, the minimum starting point costs you between £30 and £40 a month. There are slightly more rudimentary ways you can do it, such as simply running it as a Zoom call. But if you want that kind of professional gleam, then you're going to want to subscribe to a webinar platform. The risk of non-attendance obviously is lesser with a webinar because you're not literally in a room. There's less fear of social awkwardness. But the challenge of a webinar and the great pro to an in-person event is the ability to build personal connections with attendees. And obviously with webinars, as we are here, you're slightly hampered by a chat function as opposed to in-person conversations. And if we were all in a room right now, then the atmosphere would probably be slightly buzzier. We'd be chatting to one another. Conversations would naturally break out. Whereas here, the format is very much me conducting a presentation. Interaction is more limited. So that for me is the great advantage of the in-person event. Yes, probably greater cost involved. However, your investment might lead to a greater opportunity of forming a relationship that does eventually lead to business. So there's a bit of a balancing scale there. The other advantage of a webinar, actually, which I skipped over, is that obviously it gets recorded. It gets recorded. You can use that for future promotional purposes. It can sit on your YouTube channel. You can send people the link to it when the opportunity arises. And yes, you could film an in-person event, but that then gives you yet another cost, another thing to organize. So on balance, I think webinars are a great place to start. If you grow an audience, a local audience, or if you're confident that you've got a really great database of local people who are responsive, then make the most of that and get them in a room locally. But if you're starting from scratch, maybe start with a webinar. Then you've got to find a venue. So let's focus on in-person events for a moment. If you're running an in-person event, so you might start small. You might host it in your actual office. If you're thinking, well, we're going to target 10 to 15 attendees. We're going to push all the desks to one side, we'll put a screen up, and we could run it in our office and do it on a bootstrap. That is possible. The risk of that, though, is it's hosted at your business premises. So how effective do you think that's going to be in getting landlords to attend who are already signed up with a different agent? They're going to fear the sales pitch from you. You're going to lose that neutrality that you can have when you run it at a generic local venue, and you're going to lose that ability to present it as purely an informative educational event. At your own office, it's going to have that sheen of a sales event. Now, if you're willing to spend some money on this, invest money in potentially growing your client base, then you're likely to have places locally like halls, co-working spaces, hotel meeting rooms. That's what we used to use, a meeting room in a hotel. It would cost us £400 for the evening. We probably could have found somewhere slightly cheaper, but they did tea and coffee, and it was a lovely space, so it reflected well on us too. What I would say is it's well worth considering hosting it somewhere that has a bar. And I'm not just saying that to be flippant. I really found, and this wasn't a great kind of a great initiative on my part, but having a bar really fueled networking after the event, because people lingered, and after I'd bored them senseless about the renters' rights bill, they needed a drink, so everyone just naturally drifted to the bar afterwards, and it gave us quite a nice focal point for networking and really forming those relationships. So a hotel is a good option, especially if it's got a bar that you can drift to afterwards, or even a pub with a private room. Virtual platforms, there's so many, and you will drive yourself mad researching them all. I've listed some of them on the screen: Zoom, WebEx, ClickMeeting, Webinar Ninja, Webinar Jam. They all differ microscopically, so try and find the best for you. The costs will be similar. Zoom is quite expensive, actually. Unfortunately, even if you have a premium account, you have to pay an additional subscription. So I won't linger on that. It's something to research yourself and just find one that works for you. Probably just finding the one that works for you on a price level, because the features are all relatively similar. And actually, I haven't detailed it here. We've gone over webinar and in-person, and we've gone over what kind of venue you might use. But the other is also the format of the actual event itself. And there's two main options here. You get webinars and events where you have one person, or it might be you and a colleague who are hosting the entire presentation. And you probably pick a subject which is like the renters' rights bill, something to really go into in detail. And you host the entire event, and you go into microscopic detail about a particular subject. And then you get another type of event where you have a panel of speakers. And this is the kind that I used to run. Like I said, there's no one way of doing this, and one is probably as good as the other if it's done well. But I liked the idea of having a panel of speakers. I would have 2 guest speakers plus myself, 3 speakers in total. And I just thought it brought more variety, and it brought a bit more value. If you're trying to get more people in, then the greater variety of speakers you have, the more chance you have. You broaden the appeal, so the more chance you have of bringing people in. And here we go. So if that is the route you go down, the good news is that it is pretty easy, in my experience, to get good, appealing speakers without having to pay them a penny. And so what you're looking for really is compatible local businesses who also have an incentive to appear in front of a room full of landlords or sellers, or as we call them, prospective clients. So we're talking financial advisors, accountants. I've actually missed them off the list. By far, the most popular guest that we would have was solicitors, especially when we were looking at lettings legislation, but also EPC assessors, even business coaches who might have sort of mindset tips that they can give the investors. And so there's a broad range, and you know, I found that after running a few of these, we were being approached by local businesses asking to appear at our event. So you can research these companies, look on social media, try and find people who are quite active, you know, especially if they're social media types. They're probably a little bit more likely to agree to appear at a live event. You can obviously explain the opportunity is to appear in front of a room full of potential clients. And if they're nervous about speaking on stage, you could offer an interview Q&A format instead and just hold their hand through it a little bit more. So we're hosting a webinar or our live person event. In a moment, I'll focus a little bit more on the live person event because it does require more preparation, you know, running the day. But obviously, the great nervousness that we have is that nobody will come. So we've got to make sure that we promote this event really, really thoroughly. So obviously, once we've built the Eventbrite page or whatever booking website you want to use, they're all much of a muchness. I'd recommend Eventbrite. Eventbrite is free if you are not charging anything, and it's only a nominal fee if you are charging a ticket price. On that, my personal recommendation would be to charge something for an in-person event. Webinars obviously are always free, but for an in-person event, I began by making it free because obviously I wanted as many people to come as possible. But all that happened was the tickets got booked up and a lot of people didn't show up because they just reserved their ticket, but there was no commitment on their side. Even a small investment does drive attendance. So I ended up charging between £3 and £5 actually for tickets, and that really reduced no shows. So even just that small financial commitment does really help attendance on the day. In terms of promotion, yes, of course, you're going to promote it on your own social media channels. You're going to, especially for your first few events, promote it to your own database. If you've got webinars and as many people can attend as possible, that's absolutely fine. With in-person events, especially as you start to build momentum, you might want to think about holding back slightly on your database. Yes, send it out to prospective clients, maybe send it out to let-only landlords who you want to convert to managed landlords, but your own clients, obviously, well, they already pay you a fee. So you want to focus on getting non-clients there. And then if attendance actually doesn't look that great, send it out after a couple of weeks to your existing clients to see if they can fill out the room. But don't ignore things like local Facebook groups. And hopefully you're running your own local Facebook groups as well. The main source of attendance that I had was by curating a local landlord community on Facebook, and then promoting the event within that Facebook community page. So I would promote my landlord group within the general Bath community pages to drive people to my landlord Facebook group, and then within that landlord Facebook group, I would promote the event. Obviously, landlord community groups is a whole webinar for another day, but that was a really successful strategy for me. And obviously, the advantage also of getting guest speakers in, especially if they're from well-known local businesses, is you also get their databases. So when you are speaking to prospective speakers, please make sure that they are happy to also promote the event to their own customers. If you get 2 guest speakers, then suddenly the databases that you're marketing it to have tripled in size. So that's very important to do. And don't ignore local marketing as well, such as putting it in your agency window, such as having flyers in local cafes and extending invites to local business networking groups, to also other local businesses who you could invite specific businesses to attend with a view to them appearing at future events. So say, come along to this one. We'd love you to be involved further down the line, but it would be great if you and some colleagues could attend to see what it's all about this time around. Give yourself a healthy lead-in time, a couple of months, I would say, to promote the event before the day. And don't ignore things like local PR. Promote it to local papers, magazines, make sure everyone knows about it. So really shout it from the rooftops. Okay. I know I am hurtling along. If you have any questions, do drop them in the chat. I'm conscious of time already. How does this always happen? Maybe I should consider doing longer webinars, but you're busy people. So again, I'm narrowing it down to the kind of event that I would traditionally run with my agency, which was an in-person event with guest speakers. So although you've got guest speakers, you want to make sure that you are the focal point of your event. And you would therefore very much be the host. You'd be the host, and you'd also designate yourself a speaking slot. I would allow 20 minutes per speaking slot because everyone will speak for 30. As we're seeing on this webinar, actually, when you're trying to cover a topic in some depth succinctly, time disappears very quickly. And if you ask your speakers to speak for 20 minutes, they will without fail overrun. So my plan was always to have a 90-minute event where everyone spoke for 20 minutes and there was time for Q&A. Without fail, everyone would speak for 30 minutes. We'd do a Q&A and we'd overrun a bit. So give your speakers a 20-minute speaking slot, but be prepared for them to overrun. And you would open the event, you'd welcome everybody, and then you'd go straight into your own talk, which would be packed with data, packed with local market data, or detailed information about legislation. Because what we're doing is we want to give people information that they don't have access to themselves. We want to tell them how the market is, or we want to tell them what the legislation that's coming in is. And we ideally want to focus our talk on our customers' problems and pain points. Obviously, at the moment, the obvious shining beacon of an example would be the Renters' Rights Bill. So you would want to give a presentation about exactly how that's going to impact local landlords. And you could probably give some background context on the local market, percentages of how rents have gone up in the last few months. But essentially, you are wanting to present yourself as the solution to a problem. So all of these landlords who are confused about the Renters' Rights Bill, don't worry, I have got you. And then you could have your solicitor come on second to maybe go into minute detail about how Section 8 works, because in the future, we're all going to be relying on Section 8. And then you could have your third speaker perhaps be a mortgage advisor, just to give a bit of variety and some information about what's going to happen about mortgage rates for those landlords who are coming up to their mortgage renewal. And then at the end, you would close things off. So you would speak at the beginning, you'd introduce each speaker, and you'd finish things off at the end. Very much establishing yourself as the focal point of the evening. And obviously, you would then remain until the last person had left. And in my experience, people do hang around. They want to chat. They want to ask you follow-up questions, because much like this event, you've packed in a huge amount of information and they haven't quite had the chance to, although you invite questions, they haven't quite had the chance to ask you their particular questions. So you will get people remain afterwards. I won't go through this in minute detail because I've got one eye on the clock. But again, if you are running it yourself on the day, make sure you arrive early. Make sure you've checked the tech. If you're running it as a webinar, make sure you have checked that you're close enough to the router, I say, with bitter experience. If you do have guest speakers, ask them to send you your slides a week in advance. Sorry, ask them to send you their slides a week in advance. You want their slides rather than them bringing them on the day, so you can compile them all into one presentation, so you don't have those awkward moments in between presentations when you're fiddling around with the laptop trying to switch between PowerPoints. And also you want the reassurance that they have prepared for the day. So give them a deadline a week before the event to get their PowerPoint slides to you. And then really important point for in-person events, actually both. Make sure put your team on notice that they have to attend this, whether you're running it in the evening. I used to run my in-person events in the evening, and I would encourage sort of that early evening time slot as a time when people are away from work and available, but they must attend. If you're running an in-person landlord event, you want them in the room. You want to be able to highlight them and say, remember, this isn't a sales event, but you just want to give yourself the chance of saying, by the way, I do run a fantastic local business and my team is in the room. Do speak to them if you've got any questions and you can't catch me. And you want them mingling in the bar afterwards. So get your team out. And if you're running a webinar, again, get your team to attend, because especially if you're slightly light on attendees, or if your attendees aren't that chatty, you want them dropping questions in the chat to make it look like a really engaging, interactive session. I will skip over this because we've kind of covered it, but your role as host is to be the authority, be the focal point of the event, and create that urgency, speaking about issues that relate to your customers' pain points. And then really importantly, you need a hook. You need a hook at the which you refer to several times throughout the evening, because otherwise all you're doing is you're running an event where people come, they enjoy it, they scribble down notes, and then they leave. So your hook is going to be something that they sign up for either on the day or after the event. So again, thinking back to a lettings event, and this applies to webinars and in-person events, the compliance check is kind of the default thing that a lot of people do. So especially if you're talking about legislation on the day and you frighten the bejabbers out of your attendees by talking about all of the things that they have to comply with, then you say to them, again, several times throughout the session, you say, if this scares you, if you're concerned about your existing tenancies, please don't worry. If you sign up and put a QR code on the screen where they can just enter their email address and give you permission to contact them. If you sign up, we will just check over your tenancy. We'll let you know if you're vulnerable to any fines, and we'll tell you how to deal with those. And reassure them, this is not a sales pitch. This is a free service to you, and the only contact you'll get from us is genuinely helpful guidance. So the compliance check is a staple. EPC reviewer, if that's been the focal point of the session, if you've been talking EPCs, then you can say, okay, if you've got a low scoring EPC, or if you just want to know how to improve your EPC, let us know. Digital goodie bag is a lovely idea. That would be something that you put together with your guest speakers. And perhaps you will just draft a guide that summarizes the contents of what you've been speaking about. You put that together into a single digital download, put up a QR code. They had to enter their email address to access those summary guides. But make sure that you have a hook to just start converting your attendees into leads. And then you're going to make sure that you follow up promptly. I'm conscious it's 1 o'clock. I reckon we've got 4 or 5 more minutes if you're able to bear with me. It's not like we've never overrun before. So after the event, the follow-up is critical. So within 24 hours, like immediately, you need to get an email out with copies of the slides. People always ask for copies of the slides. Ask permission from your guest speakers to share them. So a really helpful email with attachments that genuinely they want. Not a sales pitch. Again, I can't stress that enough. Not a sales pitch. Thank you for coming. And maybe also with a link to book for the next. It's great if you can have the next webinar or the next event already lined up on the day, so that you can then get them to sign up even during the event. So within 24 hours. Then 3 to 5 days after, a follow-up, personal, not generic. But going just again, was there anything that came up that you would like further information about? And then you can do things like connect with attendees on LinkedIn. But you want to keep an eye on signups for your hook. And those people who have not signed up for your hook, I would then maybe a week or so after the event, just send them a personal email saying, I hope that you got a lot out of our event. I just wanted to check because, as you know, we're offering this free compliance check, and I want to make sure you don't miss out. Would it be of any interest to you? And would you like to book that in with me? So do that for everyone who hasn't yet signed up. Right. We talked about fear of failure, and this is a critical point. And this is how you can run this event without it becoming a zero risk of it being a failure. And it involves a bit of a shift in mindset. And I hope you don't think I'm trying to just sort of sneak in a get out of jail free card here. I'm going to skip forward to the next slide. There is no chance of failing, because I want to stress that the purpose of running these kind of events isn't always to pack out the room. And your first, second event, that might not happen. But if you do it right, it can be a success anyway for these reasons. Part of the reason you're doing this is to position yourself as a local expert. And even if you have a half-empty room, you can still do that very effectively, just by virtue of the fact that you are standing on stage in front of some people who might be prospective clients, or there might be your team, their partners, your friends and family. Get as many people there as possible. Even if your bookings are looking good, still get your team, still get your friends, still get your family, even if they're standing around the edges of the room. That looks fantastic. And make sure that you get good coverage of the event. So we're talking photographs that show the front rows, that show some people there, some video of you speaking authoritatively, and those are tremendous marketing assets. Speaking in delivering this kind of information to any kind of audience is a brilliant way of demonstrating your expertise. So view your first event as a PR exercise. It's a positioning exercise. It's you taking your place in the spotlight. And if people don't come, then you will still get fantastic marketing assets to fuel your next event. And you need to create that kind of snowball effect before you can reasonably expect sellouts. But if you do it right, then you will create that kind of FOMO thing, that snowball effect that makes sure that people want to be there the next time, because they don't want to miss out on all of that expertise and all of those great speakers. So do it right, and it's literally zero failure. You'll get something from the event, something valuable. That's been a real whistle-stop tour. If anyone, and this is kind of me doing my little one sales pitch, if anyone would like more information on this, then I've a lot of experience running these. Please do get in contact with me. Before I make the downloads available, I've got one favor to ask. Very quick favor. So if you know me at all well, you'll know that I've been running my own business for about 6 months now, and it's great fun. I've literally just managed to activate my own Google business page, and I'm trying to build out the profile on that to fuel future events, to fuel my own business. If you have got value out of this or a previous webinar, I would be immensely grateful if you'd scan that QR code and leave me a positive Google review saying just how informative this was. If you didn't find it informative, I'd love you to let me know why. And I mean that quite genuinely, because I'm always trying to improve and get better. Maybe don't put it on Google, but drop me a line and give me some feedback. But yeah, if you feel at all positive about this, I would be massively grateful for the Google review. Like I say, it's a whistle-stop tour, but I hope it's given you some impetus and some enthusiasm and appetite for doing this, because it's a fantastic opportunity. It just requires a bit of nerve to jump into it if you've never done it before. I'm going to leave you with some resources that I've just put in the downloads area. I've put 3 documents there, which you're very welcome to download and keep. One is a checklist, which pretty much has everything that I've just hurtled through on. So if you do run one of these events, you can use that as a checklist to make sure you don't forget anything. The second is a template that you can send to local accountants, local solicitors, whoever you're targeting to be guest speakers at your event. You can use that template to invite them to speak at your event. Please do adapt it to make sure it's relevant and accurate to what you're doing. And the third document is a template to use to invite your attendees to opt in to whatever your hook is, because you need their permission to do that. So if you're trying to get them to join you for a compliance review, then you need them to either scan a QR code or click on a link that takes them to an opt-in page, perhaps on your website, or even if it's an in-person event, fill out a little card on the day that gives them permission for you to get in contact with them. So that third document is a template for obtaining that permission. And it's quite carefully worded to present it very much as a positive, as something they're going to want to do. So I hope those resources help you. Thank you very much for joining this webinar. I do them once a month. Next month, we're doing a beginner's guide to AI for estate agents. And the month after that, we are doing a editing tutorial on CapCut for your videos. Thank you for being here. I've had great fun. And please do drop me a line if there's any further information that you need. Thanks. Bye-bye.